Well, alrighty, gang. Welcome back to the Gutowski Files, starring our very own Stephen Gutowski. He is the founder and owner and editor over at thereload.com. Thereload.com, by the way. I know you're tired of me saying it, but
Download the ASP Unlimited app for all the content you love from active self-protection and more with no interference from YouTube. No ads, no age gates, exclusive videos, seminars, classes, and more on iOS, Android, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. Hit the link in the description or download ASP Unlimited from your app store today.
if you would just go get a membership over at The Reload, then I wouldn't have to say this every week. So go do it. Stephen, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Just got back from filming some badge cam breakdowns with John Correa. He's on his way to go do expert witness stuff out in New Mexico. You and I were discussing this before we hit the record button, and either the John Correa angle will tie into what we're going to talk about here because
is he flying out there?
he was going to take a private
plane.
Yeah, I mean, we got to talk about this. We're probably going to have an emergency board meeting about active self-protection and discuss his frivolous spending. Jokes aside, that guy's the most frugal person you'll ever meet. Not cheap. He's not cheap with his friends and his coworkers, but he doesn't blow money on dumb stuff. He's got, I think his computer is 5 or 6 years old. His iPad is 3 or 4 years old. You know, his phone's always new, but anyway.
I think his private flight experience is a little different than what we're going to be talking about too.
For sure, yeah. John has a plane with like 20 other people that they all share the maintenance costs, like a little Cessna. So no, he's not breaking the bank with that. So this week we are talking about a story over at The Reload, and this just got published. You literally published this right before we got on the air here. It is by Stephen Gutowski, and the headline is NRA President Flew Around on Private Jets with Group's Lawyer. Now, we're not talking about Wayne LaPierre here. Right? We're talking about the next presumptive president?
The current NRA president, Charles Cotton, and potentially the next executive vice president, the guy who seems, at least according to multiple sources that I've spoken with who know what's going on inside the NRA, seems like the leading candidate to replace Wayne LaPierre. That's who we're talking about. Charles Cotton, current president, potential next executive vice president, which is counterintuitively is actually the more powerful role.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little stunned. I was a little stunned to read this when we got together on this call. I mean, we just had a giant case in New York involving the NRA in the immediate past. Leader there, Wayne LaPierre, and the main thing they were talking about in that was the main sort of misuse or misappropriation of NRA funds was for private jets, for stuff like having Mrs. LaPierre flown over the common people at a NASCAR event, you know, so she wouldn't have to wait in traffic. This doesn't, I mean, it kind of boggles my mind, honestly. It's like they think no one's paying attention right now, and that's not true at all.
Yeah, and, you know, the other thing about that New York civil trial is that it's actually not over. They're still in the middle of it. There's a second phase where the judge is going to decide exactly what to do after the jury found that the NRA didn't safeguard its charitable assets and that Wayne LaPierre diverted funds for his own personal use, including, in most cases, for private jet travel. Now, to be clear, that with Wayne LaPierre's, those accusations were about using NRA funds to pay for private jet travel that was personal in nature and was not actual business expenses. So those are not the accusations here. I don't have sources saying that any of this was for personal reasons, that they were traveling together, I guess, more or less for NRA related business. So that's a key distinction, just to be especially clear on that point. But one of the things that they're going to be looking at in the second phase of this trial is whether or not there are ongoing problems at the NRA, or that the same problems that the NRA faced previously that led to this jury verdict could repeat themselves in the future. And so that, you know, that's where something like this, even if it doesn't constitute a personal expense, could indicate issues remaining at the NRA, especially because of the nature of flying with one of your top contractors, like the Brewer firm, who represents the NRA in the New York civil case and in a lot of other cases, it's an outside contractor. It's not Brewer is not part of the NRA. He doesn't work for the NRA. He's a contractor, a vendor, an outside lawyer. So, obviously it creates a certain level of conflict of interest to take what they're at least sort of claiming were free private flights with your one of your vendors, one of your outside contractors, and also obviously there's some skepticism from NRA insider, well, from new board members, some of these reformers who about whether or not these flights were really free, or that they didn't factor into the money that the NRA already pays the Brewer firm.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a quote from your article that you just published here, and I want you to react to this if you would. Quote, Mr. Cotton has, on limited occasions, flown with our firm when convenient for business reasons. Travis Carter, a spokesman for the firm, told the Reload. Quote, any arrangements actually save the NRA money. Our firm does not charge clients additional costs for their private travel. What do you make of that? Because that's
so obviously keywords in there are business related. That's one big point that they want to make sure is clear, which is why I want to caveat that no one has said that these weren't business related. Right. To me at least, and I don't have the full accounting of how these flights happened. We just know that, as Travis Carter confirms there, they did happen, and multiple sources told me they were happening. But additionally, there are some interesting word choices in there of additional costs. What that means exactly, I don't know. It's not as though they provided any sort of documentation or itineraries or transparency on how these flights were booked or anything like that. So we just had their word to go off of. And that's where, if you look a little further down in the story, some of the new board members that have been elected are a bit skeptical of the money involved here. But yes, the Brewer firm does explicitly say these weren't paid for. They weren't additional costs to the NRA because the NRA is a client of the Brewer firm.
Okay, so if you get down in the article a little further, you do reference recently the NRA members voted for a slate of reform candidates, which I think is very interesting. And those people are opposed to people like Cotton and Brewer. Talk to us about that real quick.
Yeah, so the NRA's board elections just occurred earlier this year. We got the results ahead of the annual meeting that is coming up in Dallas in about 2 weeks. I'll be there. I think you'll be there too, right? But so the NRA members voted. The voting members voted. I think we've talked about this before, but not all NRA members can actually vote. It's probably about half, or at least it used to be about half. I'm not sure what the ratio would be today, but and there was a slate of reform candidates, some of which are quoted in this piece as sort of skeptical about these private flights, but there were 4 of them. Some of them had already been on the board previously and were big opponents of Wayne LaPierre and Charles Cotton and Bill Brewer and Andrew Rulanundum, who's the current interim executive vice president, and just the people who basically run the NRA at this point. So the 4 of them won their elections, and actually they ended up being some of the top vote getters in the NRA's board elections, which I think is really the first concrete sign that NRA members at large are becoming more receptive to this reform message that these guys have been pushing. I mean, they want things like, they previously wanted the removal of Wayne LaPierre. Obviously, he's resigned since then, but they want to go even so far as maybe to completely strip the organization to the studs and reform how it operates, how many people are on the board, who's on the board, how the bylaws work, all of these things. They want really significant changes that they haven't seen yet from current leadership.